Emergent architecture is organic. Emergent architecture evolves in an organic way, but it is not aimless or accidental. Actually, it is quite intentional and aspirational. When faced with the need for structure, the structure is thoughtfully designed, drawing on Appamada's core principles of mindful care, the restraints of the precepts, the cultivation of the paramitas, and most importantly, the realization of our collective vow for relief of suffering and liberation. It is a minimalist approach, adding only the structure necessary to support the need for it.
Would you want to include beauty here? Yeah, I know you mentioned it before as such an important value, but
Yeah, I wouldn't put it right here though.
okay. Social architecture is different from physical architecture in that the structures we are designing are fluid rather than solid. The elements are people and their relationships rather the elements are people and their relationships rather than doors, the windows, walls, and floors, and their functions are dynamic rather than fixed. Yet there are still structures that support and shape our activity. From forms like bowing as we enter the zendo to board meetings discussing finances.
When we open our eyes, we begin to perceive the social architectures all around us, in families, offices, schools, sports, neighborhoods, and nations. The way these forms have been created has a profound impact on our lives and on the quality of our relating with each other. Yet the structures themselves are rarely noticed as we focus all of our attention on the activities and individuals within them. Sometimes it may seem as though social structures are as fixed and solid and immutable as physical architectures, but it turns out that they are not. Social architecture recognizes, in other words, that just reacting to an immediate situation does not resolve the underlying dilemmas that created it. For that, we need to develop a responsive, dynamic, adaptive structure.
The structure itself collaborates in this endeavor and its own evolution, as its developers at Appamada have ongoing consultation with the councils and the board and the Sangha. Appamada gave us the opportunity to be thoughtful and intentional in developing a fresh social architecture that brings together the practice of Zen, the rich teachings of the Dharma, and the bodies, hearts, and minds of contemporary people. We have worked at the intersection of longings, longing for relief from suffering, longing for liberation, longing for connection and care, and longing to find meaning and purpose in our lives. The social architecture of Appamada has evolved to address these deep longings through new forms for the expression of ancient wisdom and compassion.
Participatory democracy. I've called Appamada a participatory democracy. I think of that as an active, energized form of self-governing with a systems perspective, in that it has these qualities. Distributed. Decision-making and other forms of power are organized as systems and subsystems in which everyone is included and everyone has a voice. Councils, the board, and Dharma teachers are subsystems with specific functions, but the subsystems are open for anyone who meets the criteria for those functions. So there are defined roles, but Appamada continues through active participation distributed across the whole Sangha.
Principled, Appamada's participatory democracy is grounded in the Buddha's Dharma, specifically the precepts and the Bodhisattva vow. Enacted, participatory democracy is not an abstract concept or theory. It is a structure defined only through engagement by wholehearted participation in the life of the Sangha. Active engagement is the lifeblood flowing through all activities, forms, groups, practices, roles, ceremonies. None of these even exist until they are enacted.
Emergent. The architecture that gives meaning and shape to our participatory democracy has evolved over 30 years of development, resolving dilemmas and meeting challenges along the way. As new challenges and dilemmas arise, we meet them with fresh eyes and fidelity to our vow. A participatory democracy is alive, with enough structure to support its stability and integrity, and enough flexibility to evolve in order to thrive and survive.
Embodied. A Sangha is a living organism that is composed of living organisms. It has a physical presence in the world. It does not need to shout or wave its arms to make its presence known. It does not need to expand to be greedy for more. It's the model of contentment, ease, connection, and care. This makes our way of managing ourselves, our participatory democracy, quite unusual and essential in a culture like ours. Because it is so unfamiliar for most people, there are sometimes tensions in the Sangha as people attempt to map their common models from family, school, works, politics onto our Sangha. It takes time to grasp this Appamada way and willingness to open to this path beyond our conditioning with its preconceptions, judgments, its limited and limiting views. This is why we need each other.
Okay, so that's the part I added. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Appreciative inquiry and collaborative architecture. At Appamada, the development of the Sangha's unique structure has not been confined to the vision of one or two architects. The development of the Sangha is a collaborative endeavor. We've frequently drawn on a resource called appreciative inquiry, a process of collaborative discovery and design developed by David Cooperrider, a professor at Case Western Reserve University and founder of the Fowler Center for Business as an Agent of World Benefit, and his colleagues. It is based on 5 steps, which can be repeated, as can the whole process, as often as you like. It works well when you want to engage the whole Sangha as a brain trust and develop a collective imagination. It's important too when whatever is being decided will have a collective impact on the Sangha or require a wider commitment for taking on responsibilities and effort. Appreciative inquiry is a powerful resource for organizations to build a shared vision for the future and engage broad support for realizing it. You can learn more about appreciative inquiry in the Tributaries chapter. Here's a summary of the process and its 5 steps. The most important guideline is that the process engages everyone in the entire organization.
Step 1, define. Clearly establish the focus of the appreciative inquiry. What do we want to learn more about for planning the way ahead? Sometimes this first step is determined in advance for a particular purpose. Sometimes it is the opening activity. Step 2, discover. The next 2 steps depend on pairs interviews of people randomly matched throughout the whole organization. In the interviews, each person describes the strengths and valued aspects of the organization as it currently exists. Step 3, dream. In the same interviews, each person describes in detail what it would look like if at some point in the future, this organization was their ideal Sangha, community, program, and so on. What would they be doing? What would others be doing?
Step 4. No, I think Ed is next.
Ed is next.
Okay, Ed is here. Sorry for being late.
No problem. We're happy to have you come.
A lot of traffic. I was being a good board member for our concert association. Step 4, design. Collect the interview responses, bring people together to analyze them for key themes and common longings. What would be the plan for moving toward our aspiration? What are the doable steps, and how would we be able to recognize our progress? We design concrete plans. Step 5, in which everyone commits to the plans and the resources needed to realize them: human, financial, technological, environmental, social, and so on. This is the point where individuals and groups commit to taking responsibility for next steps, working through the plan and celebrating the gains that are made. We've used appreciative inquiry numerous times at Appamada, particularly when we come to a crossroads, a difficult situation, or a place of confusion. It is an engaging and heartening process for the Sangha, especially because the aspiration for the Sangha as a whole is shared rather than concentrated in just one teacher or a small handful of people.
It engages people one-on-one in personal conversations about their hopes and dreams for the Sangha. Every voice is heard. It can be used for inquiries large and small. Should we move to a new location? Should we start a family program? Should we launch a fundraising campaign? These questions are all good candidates, for example, for appreciative inquiry. It's enormously helpful in understanding the wide range of perspectives in the Sangha and the kinds of hopes and dreams Sangha members hold for it. In the process, criticism is revealed as reflecting an unmet ideal. And so the inquiry helps focus attention, imagination, effort, commitment, and resources in ways that reflect our shared values and aspirations.
I'm going to read this Charles Vogel quote on the opposite page before we get into the next one. To create something that others want to join and support, we have to remember a core tenet. Communities function best and are most durable when they're helping members to be more successful in some way in a connected and dynamic world. If you forget this, or even worse, if you never understand this, then your efforts will be misplaced. The communities I'm encouraging you to build should make people, including you, stronger, happier, and full of well-being.
Key takeaways on emergent social architecture. Number 1, elements of architecture, physical or social, resolve dynamic tensions that may be physical, psychological, social, or we may even say attentional. In the next chapter, we will share some of the particular dynamic tensions, dilemmas, that shaped Appamada's unique social architecture. The values and principles with which the dilemmas are met are shared at every level across the Sangha. Therefore, social architectures are distributed.
I guess I want to make one comment here that in the stuff we've read tonight, I would like to see some examples because it seems very abstract. And I think, I mean, I know there's problems with examples. Like when I give an assignment in art, the problem would be that people would then do the example.
Right.
You know, but I kept wanting to read an example.
Yeah, I see. The thing is, all the examples are all of the following chapters. That's where all of the, so this is setting things up so that people will have a sense of when we get to the concrete particulars, which are starting in the next chapter, they'll have a way to understand them better. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I don't know. How about Ed and Anne? How do you feel about that?
I was going to say, And that's good to hear that the following chapters are going to detail those things.
Yeah.
But maybe you can just give a 1 or 2 liner
Uh-huh.
just to indicate that we'll be talking more in detail about how you dig shovels or how you pits, just a
Right.
1 liner.
Right. Yeah.
I thought you did that earlier on, a few lines up.
That's
You,
kind of what I thought, but
yeah, you talked about, I'm going to cover this later in chapter, tributaries chapter.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I,
So
I don't feel the same need for examples.
Okay.
okay.
I
You
meant to
did mention in terms of appreciative inquiry, those were good.
Yeah. Okay.
That it would be, a new location and on and on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, am I reading and who's reading?
Well, Anne just finished reading, right?
Oh, so you're
Right.
next. Okay.
Yeah, it's number 2.
You're on number 2.
Okay. Number 2. Architecture has a pattern language resulting from its uses. Although there may be endless ways to design a kitchen, they necessarily form a pattern around the activities related to cooking, storing, and serving food. Zen sanghas are each unique, yet they are all designed around the activities related to meditation, study, and community. Therefore, social architectures are enacted. The seemingly solid elements of architecture actually consist entirely of relationships, which give a structure to patterns of activity. It is the same with the social organization of a sangha. Even the seemingly solid forms of traditional Zen are composed entirely of relationships. Therefore, social architectures are relational. I like how you say that. That's very nicely said.
Thank you.
I'll read one more. The sole purpose of the Sangha's architecture is to give support, meaning, and shape to the activities it enables and the people who inhabit it. It has no independent existence. Therefore, social architectures are enabling. You're up, Kim.
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
We'll do that.
It, no, I mean it's kind of a sly way of getting in emptiness.
Oh,
That is true. It's subtle, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Social architectures are dynamic rather than fixed, as physical architectures are. It's important to remember this point. We are above all engaged in a timeless liberation project that builds the bridges it needs to cross as the journey unfolds. Therefore, social architectures are emergent.
Conclusion. These 3 views of systems, evolution, and architecture reveal deeper relationships in the Sangha beyond the individual encounters we explored in Chapter 11. The patterns and processes of these deeper relationships can determine whether the Sangha as a whole is healthy or unhealthy, liberating or oppressive. As history shows, even with the best intentions, good people can unintentionally create toxic or disempowering systems, organizations, or families. It's a sobering thought.
Learning to think from the system's view created a permanent experience of groundlessness for me, beginning with that first terrifying glimpse of the black hole in Joko's Sesshin so long ago. It is disorienting and scary at first. You realize in your bones that there's nothing whatsoever to hold on to, nothing solid or permanent that you can create, control, build, or fix. Nothing you can absolutely predict or plan. Everything is utterly open. Still, you must function in the world of form, the thingness of it, with its cold winds that demand a coat, its hunger that needs feeding. Yet, even so, everything is constantly, radiantly in flux, creating a shimmering, unknown universe.
The sooner you learn to settle into that awareness, to find ease, joy, and aliveness in it, to realize its boundless potential, the sooner you yourself become a quantum beingness, the pure, clean light of vow. Oh, the pure, clean light of vow. Okay. We usually cannot grasp this all at once, but we cannot unknow it either. Once we've seen it, we are consumed in that brilliant light, and so is everyone and everything else. Our usual frames for thinking, learning, and understanding cannot comprehend it. They are like window frames that let in light but cannot contain the sun. So there is a form of practice that is about cleaning the windows. But at some point, you simply step outdoors and look up. All is empty, brilliant, perfect in its own being. Now, what will you do? Wow, man, I love that paragraph.
Thank you.
Do you want to do a footnote for the quote?
A footnote?
I mean, of where it's from? I don't know.
What quote?
All is empty, really imperfect in its own being.
Oh, no, it's right out of the chant.
I know.
Yeah. I don't want to put it there because it'll disrupt the flow of things.
Okay. Should we read this surrender?
Let's do that. Yeah, it's 2 pages, so let's do that, and then we can continue on.
Okay.
Remember where we are? We're with this little insight there.
Yeah, this architecture. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Surrender. I sat on a floor cushion in front of a slight, pale woman. Oddly enough, I had met her before. We shared coffee in my neighborhood a few months earlier to discuss visual thinking and its application. At that time, she did not mention she was a Zen teacher. She was in her role as professor. The second time in her company was very different from our last, since I was not the same person she had met. The person before her now wasn't determined and exuberant, spilling over with ideas of how to teach visual literacy to the masses. This person was soft and receptive, in a state of not knowing, like a newborn baby.
I had no tools. I was not posturing. I was playing zero games. As they say in Zen practice, I was ready. I was also crying like a baby. I sat in front of this semi-stranger, weeping and weeping and weeping and weeping, just an endless amount of tears. Peg, this teacher, sat in total silence while I did this. She said not one thing to me as I disassembled before her. She simply witnessed and held space. She held this space with a maturity and compassion I had never seen before. Peg expressed no opinions. She asked me no questions. She did not try to fix anything. She did not intervene. She expected nothing from me.
The present she gifted to me that day was a goddamn revelation. It was like drinking water for the first time. I slowly stopped crying, sobering to the glimmer of an idea that something else was possible. What I knew with certainty was that I had not developed the internal resources necessary to live well in this turbulent life. Most of us, indeed, have not. I also knew I wanted to take up this different way of meeting the world that she was so quietly demonstrating. From that day on, Peg Syverson and another Zen priest, Flint Sparks, both became my teachers, and they turned out to be the kind of innovators I looked for in my work. They were stewards of a very old tradition, Soto Zen Buddhism, but they were also adept weavers of progressive Western disciplines into Eastern teachings.
Peg was a rhetoric and composition professor, now retired, and an exceptional curator of techniques around group dynamics, the use of power, community building, and human development. Flint was a clinical psychologist, now retired, with over 40 years of experience working in the true mud of life: physical illness, mental illness, tragedy, death, and dying. Over many years, these two formed a secular, spiritual community that had every quality I was unconsciously seeking: wisdom, compassion, sanity, humility, and efficacy. These values were reflected in the name of the community, Appamada. Appamada is said to be the last word spoken by the teacher Gautama Buddha. It means mindful, active care. The techniques Peg and Flint incorporated into their lessons were pragmatic to the core and non-individualistic. Can't even say individual. There was no quest for a fantastical personal enlightenment. There was no wishing or hoping or praying for someone else to save you. We did not get to revel in the scripts about our difficult lives or buy into our stories about other people. We got elegant and dignified training in attention, self-awareness, and personal responsibility. We learned the two wings of the bird: compassion for all beings, including ourselves, integrated with wisdom.
I'm just wondering if you want to put the was in the first paragraph up next to I.
What do you mean?
You have such a big space. Every quality I.
Oh, hold on a second. Wasn't, let's see. Which chapter or which
Here.
paragraph? Oh, okay. Overbalance. Oh,
I was.
And the other thing is, I'm wondering if dying should come before death. Tragedy, dying, and death. I don't know.
Death and dying. Death and dying.
I'm hold on a second.
Well, is death not the process and dying the outcome?
Yeah. For some reason, it's breaking there. I don't know why.
Oh.
Mm.
I have no idea, but it's wanting to break there no matter what.
Okay.
It's just being, kind of weird.
Glitchy.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that.
Sometimes you have to retype it.
I did retype it, but
Oh no.
it's determined. I don't know what it thinks is happening at that line break, but
Okay.
it's insisting on it. So
The work we did was not sentimental or romantic. It was difficult and painful and empowering and liberating. It was also ongoing. After 15 years of heartfelt and clumsy practice, I still can't anticipate the fruits of our work. What I can say with certainty is that without Appamada and its offerings on spiritual formation and, for me, psychological integration and reparenting, I would not be upright today. So I extend a bow across space and time to my teachers in this community and to the forces that co-arose so I might learn to meet reality just as it is and step wholeheartedly into this precious life. Sunny B. Sangamir, that's beautiful.
isn't that a gorgeous reflection? I mean, she really is such a great writer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very heartfelt. Okay. The architecture and design perspective realizes that the evolutionary impulse does not have an agenda or plan. We are the improvisational engineers who create with and develop that impulse. We are designers in the universe. This realization taught me not to cling to notions of blueprints, models, or sets of goals. A tiny, swiftly evolving airborne virus demolished the 5-year strategic plan of every organization on the planet. It abruptly threw us all into a new evolutionary cycle.
Evolutionary change is not motivated by novelty for novelty's sake. It arises from the need to improve an organism's fitness, its capacity to survive and thrive in its environment, and realize its purpose. The purpose of a Sangha is to liberate beings and convey the Dharma, a Sangha's DNA, down to the future generations. Our function as social architects is to provide a bridge between the Buddhas and ancestors and those future generations who will surely need the Dharma's wisdom and compassion. The evolutionary view reveals the dance of impermanence and continuity, unfolding over the vast reaches of time. We are like woodsmen, planting seedlings for the forests of the future.
Architecture also evolves. It may be fully planned in advance or emerge from materials and circumstances at hand. Traditional forms were once emergent, as in Zen's early days. Over time, repetition established standard forms, creating blueprints and models that could be adopted and reused, making things more efficient. Zen's architecture evolved from the first days of Buddha's disciples meditating in the forest to the enormous formal temples and monasteries of China and Japan. Today, emergent architecture appreciates the traditional forms of Zen and their functions while responding to present circumstances and practitioners' needs with an eye to future Dharma transmission.
And Appamada, rather than dutifully following the Japanese blueprint, we've taken an organic approach. With each stage of Appamada's development, we have designed together social structures that reflect the function of traditional forms while providing for their appropriate contemporary expression.
Yeah, that could be, that could be our bumper sticker. Only time will tell whether this is a bold, fresh evolution of Zen or an experiment leading to a dead end, a heretical wrong turn. Everything depends on the future generations who will come to learn about and convey the Dharma. We strive to create causes and conditions that will support this transmission well.
Many others are engaged in wide-ranging experiments with Dharma and Sangha, online through social media, with phone apps, psychotropic drugs, and artificial intelligence. This is a new frontier. Yet we must not lose sight of the Buddha's fundamental practice and teachings in our fascination with novelty. Postmodern architecture's artistic but often inhumane, soul-sucking buildings should serve as a cautionary tale for Sangha innovators. Never lose sight of the profound cosmic unfolding of the majestic creativity of the universe through the three treasures of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, with which we have been entrusted. The perspective of architecture and design gave us the courage to build new forms and social structures, imbued with meaning, to support the Sangha and serve the vow, even amidst boundlessness and impermanence.
Appamada's future depends on the intentions and efforts of those who carry this vow forward. It is my deepest hope that they will view the Sangha from these perspectives as they realize the Dharma. This book expresses what we have learned and created together so far, lighting the way ahead. It takes highly trained architects and engineers, along with an army of workers, to build a hospital. But the doctors and nurses and administrators who run it do not need to be trained architects, engineers, electricians, or plumbers. They don't create the structure, but they alone can bring it to life and make it useful. In part 4, we'll show how Appamada's distinctive social architecture emerged as an organic yet orderly evolution of the Dharma in our everyday lives in response to some existential dilemmas.
The best community building is an art. There's no single formula. what works for you and your members will not work for everyone. Success will reflect your values, priorities, and growth. Just as in art, there are forms and skills you can build on, but copying someone else's work won't create something truly inspiring. You have to bring your own creativity and experience to the work. Charles Vogel, The Art of Community.
Yeah. So that's the end of this part. And I have questions about this. And the questions are whether this should be 3 separate chapters, or whether it should be kept as one whole chapter. That's my primary question. These 3 views. There's a reason for keeping them with one chapter, and that they're kind of integrated together, but yeah, I don't know what you guys think.
Is there more explanation possible of how they're integrated together?
Well, hopefully that's what the conclusion is doing.
Oh,
Hopefully that's making it, and this and the key takeaways are for each of those sections.
What is
So-
the beginning paragraph of the chapter? Does it say
I can go back.
we have 3, we're going to talk about 3 views of
Yeah, it does, but not in the first paragraph. It's
further key takeaways. There's the architectural, there's the evolutionary, there's the, I can't remember the other one.
And I think the key takeaways is going to require multiple readings, if you will.
Oh, golly. Yeah.
Yeah, just to round it all up. And it makes sense to have the things together in one because of the interrelatedness of it all.
yeah.
And with the key takeaways, it puts the rubber band around them. But you do need to sit with that and maybe read it slower.
Yeah.
I would say break it down into 3 chapters. I mean, there's a lot. Your chapter on the architecture that section is pretty long.
Yeah. Yeah, the issue is that in the beginning, I'm saying you need these three perspectives.
Right.
So,
Joys of seeing Sangha, right.
yeah. But that could be the introduction to this section. Like that whole first part could be the introduction, and then chapter 12, that'd be the start of it. And then chapter 12 would be Sangha system. And chapter 13 would be the evolutionary view. Chapter 14 would be 14 would be the architectural perspective. I don't know.
That makes sense to me, and I think it might make a little easier for people referring back to it. That they could say, "Oh, what was that? Let's go back and read, particularly about the architectural stuff."
Yeah.
No, it's not going to make that much difference.
Yeah. The only thing that worries me about that is these things have to be integrated. Like you can't, you know what I mean? You can't just do the architecture part if you have not really thought hard about the systems and the evolution of things. So they're kind of dependent on each other in a way that this is ended up all together in one chapter, because we're setting things up. You need these 3 views in order to understand what I'm about to tell you about the Sangha. You need to be able to see in these ways, let's say. So it's like the training a microbiologist gets in how to understand what you see through a microscope. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So these are the key aspects of that view, but they're integrated, right? So if you just take the systems view, you don't know where things are going because you don't have a sense of evolution.
Right.
If you just take the evolutionary view, you don't really have a sense of what happens when you want to be intentional about that evolution. You know, when you really want it to be intentionally designed.
Mm.
So that's that's why I've gone back and forth on this. You know,
Does more have to be said about the relationship and the necessity?
well, it's there. It's definitely there
Okay.
in a bunch of places. Um, so
Mm.
yeah, so and especially in the conclusion where it's sort of tying them all together, and it's saying, you know, these three views are all talking about deeper relationships beyond the individual, which we talked about in chapter 11. So it's like, so then it just encapsulates the systems view, the evolutionary view, and the architecture view in a sort of a summary form, right?
I don't think there's any way that you can get away from maybe making multiple times to point to the interrelatedness of the
Yeah,
three things as you go through each one of them.
yeah. Well, that's what I'm doing with the lead in for each one.
Yeah.
So like, and the transitions. So, uh, let's see back here with architecture. I can probably tell you what's going on. Okay, so, uh,
And I
okay,
think the key takeaways puts a nice bow around it and it gives you a chance to take a deep breath and
yeah,
let it settle.
yeah, and also sort of gives you the capsule summary of those sections.
And me being strange as I can be, I would want to read the key takeaways first, read the chapters, and then read the key
Yeah,
takeaways at the end.
oh, that's a good idea.
What are you supposed to be getting here, really?
I'm not even sure people read books anymore, so this is, you know, in some ways feels, uh, I don't know, mythic or something. Yeah, yeah. These are the things that I feel have really provided Appamada with a deep foundation, and also possibly some guidelines for if you want to change things in the future. So
Mm.
how does that change the architecture? What is the evolutionary trajectory you're on? And does this make the system healthier or unhealthier? These are not the ways people usually think. They usually think in terms of their whim. So I would like this to be different. And so therefore I'm going to make this change. But if you don't understand the basis on which these things have been created, uh, you risk doing a lot of damage that way.
It, last couple of days, I've been looking at, because I want to get the right URL, every website for for the lay Zen Teachers Association,
Uh-huh.
because a lot of the URLs that they had were old ones, like
Oh yeah.
not secure, and some are dead too. But it's been
Yeah, right.
interesting to look at all these websites and realize the depth of what we're doing.
Yeah. It's profound.
I'm up to 60 of them right now. There's 130. I
That's
mean,
a lot.
not different. They're not all different from each other,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah.
And isn't it sometimes good to stretch it to have someone have to think or take a detour to go a little bit deeper into something? There's
Well,
a current poem that I'm working on, and I reference to biological things with the brain in relationship to memory going, the corpus callosum and the hippocampus. And I did a kind of preview reading with our writing group the other night.
Uh-huh.
A couple of people said that there shouldn't be something in there that they couldn't comprehend or understand right off the bat. And I said, well, think about the fact that here is something that maybe you want to go look it up. And when you look it up, you get a wider level, a wider range of understanding and association with it.
I think
So,
it's important. I mean,
Yeah, you'd have second grade reading level otherwise.
well, this is the thing, this is itself a teaching. So hopefully it's not totally abstract and abstruse and that people can grasp it. And if it's difficult, I actually don't have a problem with that. I had a colleague who taught me something really important about that. She taught literature. She taught very challenging literature. And her students were very resentful for a long time. And then she happened on this idea where she had them write a paper, a no more than 2 pages, that simply describes the difficulty they're having with a text. Doesn't try to solve it, doesn't, and they simply describe it. So they would, dutifully write down, like, I'm having a hard time with this text because I can't tell if it's the narrator speaking or if it's the author speaking, but maybe that's the point, And so as they wrestled with the fact that they had this difficulty, they oftentimes came to a realization about it. But the one thing that happened across the board was that they began to love difficult literature.
mhm.
It challenged them, and they loved the challenge. So I always thought that was really interesting because these students were, typical college students, very resentful at having to do any cognitive work. So it was, it's like, why are you here then?
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what we were dying for, getting out of high school, which was just regurgitating by rote so you could
Oh,
get the
yeah,
in the spin.
yeah. Yeah, I think graduate school is where I really first came alive, even because even in undergrad, you're not constructing unique and novel arguments. You're putting things together, but it's not like writing a dissertation anyway. So in any event, so this is the end of chapter 12. I'm just laying out chapter 13 right now, which is a very short chapter. The chapters now coming up now are very short, which may make some people happy, but which are not, it's necessary that they be separate chapters all the same. So it's like you either have 15 page chapters, or you have one monster chapter that's gigantic. So yeah.
Will 13 be ready for us next week?
Hold on a sec. I think 13 may be ready now. I'm not sure. Um, I think I got 13 laid out. Um, yeah, hold on here. 13.
I don't think it's on the home page. I mean,
No, no,
on
no. I haven't posted it yet.
yeah.
I just finished like putting some images in today. So I think we could look at it, definitely, even if it appears that, there are things that we need to change. But it's very short. So this chapter is like 14 pages long. That means 7 pages on the narrative side. So yeah, so we would easily get through it in one night. But it might
Okay.
be interesting to do that. I'm having more issues with the next chapters because I need to get more reflections from Sangha members. That's the main thing that's holding that up, and more photos and images. But 13 is ready, and meanwhile, so far, how do you think? How do you think it's going? Close this. Chapter 13. Save.
I'll say this about that. Um, it's kind of like going to a really good restaurant and having fine dining. You keep coming back because the meal you're having is really good and you're willing to sample anything and everything on the menu.
That's lovely. Thank you.
There's a lot to chew on. That's another restaurant
Yeah,
metaphor.
yeah, it's true. There's a lot here, but this is my intent is to, you know, is to really provide as much of this background as I can.
Well, and I've started books and things before that were just so heavy or just bogged down and you couldn't get forward. And it's just like, okay, I'm not going to finish reading this.
Yeah,
Yeah, this invites you to keep coming back. And I like how you're rolling out the I won't say discoveries, but the events and things and how it's logically growing, evolving, to use your words in there, to see the evolution of it in the process.
thanks. That's really helpful to know.
Yeah, and I think the coming chapters where you talk about the tributaries, um, and you get more into the examples, you know, what you were talking about, the dilemmas and how
Yeah,
they were dealt with,
yeah. So,
the
so
design has been.
this next part has um, a chapter on councils, a chapter on the board, a chapter on what else did I have the other chapter on? I can tell you a second here. Um, a chapter on technology. So what happened with technology, which is a lot. And councils, the board. Oh, and a chapter on the generosity initiative. So in our whole adventure with that. So yeah, that those each arose out of certain kinds of dilemmas that presented themselves. So I talk about what those dilemmas are, how the councils arose, how council system, um, our our new formation for the board, um, the new bylaws change, and the generosity initiative, and then what happened with technology, and so how that evolved from. I mean, when we started, I had a blog, which was only to keep ordinary mind folks updated about whether we were meeting or not meeting, and a few little reflections. You know, there was it. The blog was a place where we could put our hours. It was really essentially our website. And so it was very, 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 very incredibly simple. And we didn't really have any other systems in place. Then gradually we started doing some audio recordings for people who were going to not be there. They were not for public consumption, really. We sent the link around by email. So if people had missed a Sunday morning, one of our 6 people, then they could catch up. So yeah, and then these dilemmas arose as we began to grow and as we began to expand our programs. That created some dilemmas that had to be resolved by new structures. I mean, just new things that we had to do. We had to build for that. So
It's amazing how many uh, places are using still using Zoom and using hybrid and
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. The ones that didn't perished, like they just perished. So okay.
I can read.
Okay.
This is part 2 from last week.
From last week.
Last week I wrote about a symphony where all the pieces fit together to make a beautiful puzzle. The next day they didn't. Everything was off a little. Things didn't fit. I thought to myself, now I need to see imperfection as a beautiful symphony as well. Someone said I should think of it as jazz. The difference was in my body. I felt a heaviness above my eyes. I was worried. I was bothered. Things didn't go well, and I was the recipient of some criticism. I wanted reassurance, which I traced back to a childhood part. It was still uncomfortable. I remembered the story about Steve Stuckey and how in his last days he would wake up every morning with finding gratitude in something. I started doing that, appreciating what was going right, of what was working, of the extraordinary efforts that people were making to learn and to manage difficult times. I realized that when are off, I could appreciate that. I could see all the duct tape, an indication of where we had to put our energy. It was right in front of me, an opportunity to make another symphony.
Cool. Send that along. We'll add it to your other one if it should fit in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll add it. It's your other one's in chapter 13, which is what's upcoming.
It's probably more frequent.
Yeah, it's always like that. The ups and downs, you know.
When my grandkids were little, every time my daughter would call, they'd either be sick or they'd be well, and I knew the next time if they were well, she'd call. I'd say, "Oh, they're sick, aren't they?"
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mostly wrote about my uh, challenges around the layouts. So uh, getting people willing to offer some reflections and in inviting them, and uh, and also the issue with images and wrangling with images, you know, and keeping them organized and all of that. So that's been on my mind because I'm moving into the layouts. These upcoming chapters are written, they just need layouts. So we might end up just reading the narrative part and then I'll work on the layouts. Anyway, that was what I was, you know, thinking about, what I was reflecting on in what I was writing. So yeah, but I think the images give a lot of appeal. So that's what I hope anyway, is that they.
Yeah, well, yeah. I would, reading your book, I would keep wondering. So, what does this look like? What does this look like? And so, with the images and the reflections, and also, is this just theory or?
Yeah, that's why the reflections are important.
And having the images, it gives it that visual context of it being relatable and being real. It puts that layer of reality onto it, and it makes it even more accessible, maybe subconsciously, but definitely also consciously too.
That picture of inquiry is just amazing too.
Yeah, yeah, you get such a sense of community looking at that.
Wow, that must have really been something for you to see, Ed,
Yeah,
since you'd never experienced that.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I think for people who haven't had an opportunity to be at Appamada, some of these photos will place them there, you know, like give them the sense of that.
And
yeah,
also another era.
Yeah, very
yeah.
much so.
It makes it that much more real for me. Like you said, I've not been to Appamada.
Yeah,
Been to Texas more than twice, but never to Appamada.
Well, I hope you will come.
Um,
yeah.
We're very close to Stanford.
wow. So yeah, we'll see what comes out of that. Especially with the price of plane tickets. You know, a couple of things that kept popping up for me was that there were two questions in there which consistently got answered. And they were, why is one question, and what um, was the other question. And I think it's good if in reading or listening, those questions get generated but then there comes some answer or some resolution or some direction towards what those things are meaning, and I'm getting that from that. And the other thing which made it so really very strongly pertinent for me tonight is that all of this is a reference point for personal practice and personal growth. You might be talking about a sangha, you might be talking about a building, but it's all
Right.
relatable to me as, you know, that erstwhile creature called Ed, you know,
Yeah.
and the things that are in there, you know, that Appamada is like the blueprint, and that there's an organic approach, and how that relates so much to sitting zazen, and organically how things come about, and how that even has like a structure to it. And I love the Charles Vogel quote about the best community. And I'm in that phase right now, feeling like a woodsman who's planting seeds for future forest, and
Yeah.
seeing how that's going. And they said that's a sign of true commitment and practice is when you plant a seed for a tree you know you'll never see fully grown.
Yeah.
Um, all of that's there, and the evolutionary impulse. This was cool. Um, Evolutionary impulse does not have an agenda or plan. I mean, in one sense, just the way that's said, and it's not like that's a whole new revelation, like no one's ever said that before, but just the way it's said in that context in there, it just really, boom, hit home.
Thanks. That's very, it's very helpful to know that. This, you know, I don't want to be just randomly throwing things out there that are not relevant.
If you get pedantic or didactic, I'll turn off my camera.
Okay. It's a deal. I'm trying not to. I mean, I have a long career teaching, you know, at the university, so there's always that danger. It's a real temptation.
Well, as long as you don't grade on a curve, we're okay.
Everybody gets an A in my classes.
Yep.
I'm a great student of Alfie Kohn, who said there should only be 2 grades when you're teaching, A and incomplete. And they just keep working on the incomplete until they get an A.
There you go. There
And
you go.
the big difference is the speed at which it takes people.
The what?
The difference between people is how long it takes.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, absolutely. But the willingness of the teacher to stay with it is really the key. That's
Yeah,
why I like the way I'm teaching now, because there's no end of semester, right? End
yeah.
of semester at the university, everybody leaves. And I'm like, we're just getting started.
And my first Zen teacher said to me, he said, "You seem to be rushing things. You have many lifetimes."
Oh, wow.
I
But
thought
that's
that was
true.
so beautiful.
Yeah.
Things like philosophy in college, boom, right into that. I mean, dove in and was loving the deep water, got my A's. But when it came to statistical analysis, put my neck in mud, just trudging through. And it's like, I'll get there eventually, but don't hold your breath.
You guys mush on without me.
Yeah, really. And they did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. You know, thanks for those reflections. It's so encouraging, you know, and I'm at a point where that encouragement is really valuable anyway. So we have, you know, I was talking to Jeffrey Davis about this, and I said, you know, sometimes you find yourself in the canyon of doubt. In the canyon of doubt, you're like, I don't know, does anybody care about this stuff? Is this really worth doing? Is it, you know, is it just for my own benefit or what? You know, and I said we have to get ourselves out of the canyon of doubt so we can actually produce something.
All writing's like that at some point to some degree.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
And I lie to myself when I have those, especially if I'm writing and I can't get something right, a particular line, a relationship of words, and I just say, hey, I'm going to stick with it because I'm saving thousands of dollars with actual therapy work.
Right, exactly.
Say,
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I just think to myself, I don't care. I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other until this is done. And I will know when it's done. It's not done yet.
I
So,
was at a lecture by an Irish poet here the other day that the Harry Ransom Center put on, and he was talking about teaching writing, and he was saying his best advice to his students is keep your ass in the chair. Keep your ass in the chair.
right. That's absolutely right.
yep.
And be be comfortable with the uncertainty.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but it's great reading with you guys. So helpful, hearing it in your voices and making some little tweaks as I go along, and the affinity application that I have, and it's just so satisfying. So thank you for being willing to do it. It's it's helped a lot.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity.
Same thing here.
I took a whole chunk out last week and put in another whole chunk. So so it's thanks to you, your reflections. You're always so thoughtful. And I think, how's that, how can I address that question or that difficulty or that, glitch in things? And so it's very, very, very helpful. I don't, from inside it, you don't have a very good view, frankly.
There's still a question in my mind about the participatory democracy. Is that what the word used?
Yeah.
That pe people wonder about. Well, then why doesn't, for example, why can't a council just decide on something? You, why? Sometimes it seems like a democracy, and other times it doesn't.
That's why it's a particular kind of democracy. It seems like we have a democracy, but people can't arbitrarily decide the laws in America. There are systems in place, theoretically. There used to be systems in
It used to
place
be.
that that actually, had that function. So there are certain functions that are part of the subsystems inside the larger system. So the board has a certain set of functions, but if you wanted to be on the board, you could be on the board.
So we had a participatory or participative democratic republic, which is what we're actually dealing with more than a real democracy by definition.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And above a certain size, a straight democracy isn't really manageable.
Mm,
You can't really manage it.
nope.
So you need to have, it's just like in medicine, you have to have specialists in cardiology, you have to have specialists in neurology, because the field is so big. And also because people who are living their lives don't have time to make every single decision that government needs to make, right? So, so this is why these functions arise, as a way to manage the complexity of things. It's complex. Started out simple, but it's complex now.
And it's an evolution to a better state. I mean, we don't get doctors making house calls anymore, which was an amazing thing when I was little. But
Hmm.
now I can go to a specialist who all he deals with is your throat.
Right.
And that's what I need. I don't need the guy who can take my pulse and pressure and go, oh, you got the mumps. Get him in a bathtub with ice.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly. Exactly. So those things arose out of the dilemmas,
Mhm.
like there were certain dilemmas, like how do we provide specialized care for these very different kinds of parts of the body or systems in the body. So,
And on Saturday at the, because I went to one of the hands-off demonstrations here in
yeah,
Kauai, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And talking to various people there, one of the things that came up a couple of times actually, and the phrase that came out of it was that there are still blessings within things being broken.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I really like the quote about broken systems in this chapter. I'm trying to remember who the author is, where he was writing about how, it's like you're on a ship. If something breaks on the ship, you have to fix it. You don't burn the ship.
Well, unless you're 19 and you work for Doge, uh,
Exactly.
we
Exactly.
don't want to discriminate against youngsters.
Right. Exactly. Oh man, what a thing. What a time.
Hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, we're at the end of our time. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. It's just a pleasure to share this with you and hear your thoughts about it, and we'll go forward. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.